Hello, this is Lisa from Felt Eclectic, and today we are going to do a tutorial on how to make this cute little landscape painting. So let's show you what's in the kit and get started. First of all, you will have a piece of foam. This will be your felting surface to needle felt onto. It will help keep your needle from breaking. You will have a piece of pre-felt, which is 100% wool, and you can just lay it in front of you and just have it ready, and I will show you the colors that are in the kit. We have 3 different colors of blue, and these will be used to make a variance in the grade of color from top to bottom. The farther away it is, the darker the blue, and then as we get towards the horizon line, it will become lighter and lighter. Then we've got gray and white to make our clouds. And we've got 4 different colors of green to, again, add depth and variance in our foreground, starting with the darkest farther away and working towards the lighter color in the closest to us in the foreground. Finally, we have locks, and locks they just grow on the sheep this way, and they get trimmed off, washed, and then dyed in the various colors. Today we've got green, and it just keeps this cute little curly look, and I find that they work really well for landscapes, for making bushes and grasses and all sorts of things like that. And finally, we have burgundy in case you want to add berries to your bushes. So let's get started. First, what I'd like you to do is to take your piece of pre-felt, and we are going to mentally break it into thirds. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but just approximately. In most paintings, it is pleasing to the eye to have it broken into thirds. And so we are going to have today, the bottom third of our picture is going to be the land, and the upper 2/3 will be the sky. So once you've established where your bottom third is, we're going to just draw a line with our needle across the bottom third of our pre-felt. And this will just kind of keep us on track for not using too much of the wool on the sky or not using too little. So once we've established that, it's kind of harder to see here. I don't know if I can tilt there you go. You can see a little bit more there, that by poking in and out lightly across my pre-felt, you can see the line I made. So now we take our top 2 darkest colors of blue, and what we're working with today is merino wool. Merino wool is very fine, it's very smooth and very straight. It works super well for landscapes. We call it wool painting. We're not painting anything. It just looks like a painting because of how the wool lays on the fabric. To pull it off, we take the ends and we pull it away from the main source, the main skein. So I'm going to take some of the lighter blue and some of the darker blue, and I'm going to layer it on top of each other. And because it's the top of the painting and we want it darker, we're going to have probably just over half as much of the dark blue as the light. Then we're going to hold it in our hands, and we're going to lightly hold the ends, and we're going to pull our hands apart. And then I'm going to stack it nicely on top again. And what this does is it blends the 2 colors together so that you don't have just one color in a big thick spot. Another way to do it is you grab the 2 ends and then you flip your hands and put them together. Grab, pull, flip together. So you do this as many times until you are satisfied with how blended the wool looks. So you can kind of see that it's no longer one color or the other, but they're just nicely blended together. So now what I like to do for my skies, is I don't like laying it just on. To me, it looks more like you can see each fiber, and it looks like that works really well for water to me. But for skies, what I like to do is I hold it sideways, and I will then lightly pinch some off, let go before it's completely unattached like this, and I will lightly pinch and pull, and I'm kind of messing up those fibers now so that they're no longer in straight lines. Once I get to the other side, I'm just going to flip it, and I'm just going to pinch again until they are all messed up. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to take some of the wool and I'm going to start at the top, and we're going to work off of the edges of our pre-felt a little bit so that in our final project we don't see the pre-felt at all. I'm just going to lay it down where and how I like it. Once I have it where I like it, I will start adhering it to the pre-felt. Now you can hear it going right through the wool, right through the pre-felt into the foam below. We have about 3/4 of an inch of needle that has the barbs on it, but we don't want to bury it that far, because all we'd be doing is then burying the wool fibers that deeply into our foam surface. All we need to do is actually have maybe a 1/4 inch deep. So we're just tacking it down, getting some of the air out from the surface and adhering it to our pre-felt. Once we've done that, you can even see that I don't have it in a straight line. It comes up higher here, lower here. That's okay, because there's so many variances of where it depends on what time of day it is, where the light is in the sky. So now I'm going to grab the same 2 blues, but this time I'm going to use double the amount of the lighter blue and half as much of the darker blue. And just by math, that will end up making this a lighter mix. So again, grabbing the ends, pulling my hands apart and stacking it. So it's either, again, I'll show you this way, pulling and flipping and stacking, or pulling and then just laying it on top. So at this point, even though we will be, messing up these fibers, we want them to stay straight for now, just so that we can be sure that their colors are blended well. So again, I'm going to mess these up by grabbing a little and pulling. Flipping it, grabbing and pulling. Flip, grab and pull. So take a little bit. And start laying it on. And I can wisp out the ends to help blend it into where it blends with the darker. And again, we can now tack some of that on. If there's a lot going over the edge, I can just pick some up off of the edge and just kind of bring it back on. But like I said, we do want to come off of the edge of the pre-felt a little so that the pre-felt doesn't really show in our final project. Okay, and finally our final blend is we will take some of the more aqua color, grab, pull, and some of our middle blue, grab and pull, and blend those two together. And same as before, mess them up by pinching your fingers together and pulling the wool slightly apart, flipping, pinching, pulling. Now, different wools are good for different purposes. The merino wool, like I said, it works really well in these situations for making 2D projects, for wet felting, all of that kind of stuff. What you generally want for your 3D needle felting projects is a shorter staple length with a curlier wool. It tangles together easier. So as you'll see, I've actually covered that line that I made in my pre-felt, because essentially a landscape in real life, when you're looking at a landscape, the sky doesn't stop when it hits the land. The sky goes over the edge, like it still keeps going behind whatever's in front of it. So if I've got a mountain here, if I can pretend my knuckles are a mountain, I don't want to have my land and sky meet like this. You want to have your sky go behind your land so that it actually looks like it's going farther back. So I have covered part of that third line that I made. So I'm just pulling it out to blend it a bit again. So then you've got this nice variance of dark down to light on your sky. Now, if you wanted to add a darker spot, you can, or a lighter spot. Just take a very small amount of wool and mess it up. Just one of the colors if you wanted to add more, and you just add it in the spot that you want. So if this landscape painting that you're making is going to be exposed to the air and just out where people's hands can touch it, you're going to want to spend a lot of time tacking this down, and it does seem tedious, but just keep going at it. It's well worth it. If you're going to put it behind glass, it doesn't have to be quite as well felted. And so in your kit, as I said, you have this single needle, which works well, and I've done many projects with it. Or you can find online a multi-tool. And so I unlock it, and if I push back the safety guard, it has 5 needles in it. And I will show you that I can then get a little bit more done in a shorter amount of time, since I'm hitting it with 5 needles at a time. You definitely can accomplish this project with just 1 needle though. For the sake of time saving on the video, I will just hit it with this. All right, so now there is our sky. Now we will add our clouds. Clouds can be long and wispy, they can be big and fluffy, all sorts of things, but they do generally have shadows in amongst them. So we're going to start with the background of our clouds being gray so that we can add depth to them. So let's just take a little bit of gray and do the same thing, because clouds are very fluffy. We don't have a lot of lines on them, at least the ones that we'll show you today. And we will just put it down, and we want it thicker than that, so let's just keep adding more on top. And just kind of play with the cloud shape until it's something that you're happy with. We'll try and keep the bottom of it somewhat straight. And then the upper part's a little bit more whimsical and wispy. Maybe today I will just do one big cloud that kind of goes from one side to the other. I will show you again sorry, hit that. This one has 2. We usually go right off the edge of our canvases so that we don't have just full cloud, full cloud, full cloud, and with nothing going off the edge, because we want to give the impression that more is happening off of the side that we just can't see. So once I'm happy with the placement of the gray wool. I tack it down. And your picture does not have to look like mine. I encourage you to experiment, see what looks good to you. Then take your white, and we're going to add the white fluffy looking cloud parts on top. And where it's thinner, you will see the gray poking through. Where it's thicker, that will look like a thicker part of your cloud. Pull out a thin piece to go over top of my thin gray end. And just keep adding the white until you're satisfied that it looks the way you want it. The more gray you leave exposed, the moodier and more stormy the cloud will look. There is no right or wrong way. Sometimes you look at the sky and there are some of the craziest looking shapes. All right. So next we are going to do the farthest away hills or mountains. And so we're going to use our darkest green just as is. We're going to pull some off. And this is the first time we're going to use our wool not tangled up. We're going to use it and just kind of almost draw our line in the shape of the hills or mountains that we want. And they can be as dramatic as you want. And right now we're just kind of holding it where we want. And drawing on the outline of our mountains and hills that are far, far away. Once you're happy with that, then you can fill in a little bit farther down with just the dark green. So we can just add the layers on top. And again, this is because we go a little lower than our next layer so that it does layer on top instead of just butting up against each other. It doesn't look as realistic as if you put the next layer just over top of where your other one ended. All right, so put our dark green aside and grab our next two greens. We've got kind of like a sage green and then a green, I'm not sure what to call this, but it's got yellow in it, but it's not as vibrant and limey as the lightest green. So our middle two greens, and we'll mix a color. So we'll grab about 50-50 of the wool of these two colors. Now the same way with our sky color is we are going to pull and stack to blend them two together, but we will not be messing these ones up. So try and keep the fibers going in the same direction as much as possible. Okay, and then for our next layer, we'll just do the same thing, but we're going to grab a little bit more. And in order to show, let's grab the demo again. In order to show that there are certain hills going one direction and one going the other, we're going to actually layer them on one at a time. So starting with one side or the other, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to actually start this hill a little taller than this one. And I'm going to swoop it down, grab some more wool, and have this one coming up and over. And just play with the shape until it looks pleasing to you. For sake of time, again on the video, I'm going to just use my multi-tool. Okay, and we're going to grab some of our dark green again, and we're going to give the impression of some faraway bushes. So I've grabbed a small amount of the green wool, and I'm actually going to pull it between my hands and break it. So now the staple length is about half as much, and I'm going to do that, stack it up and do it one more time. So that just makes the wool that I'm working with shorter. I'm going to take it in half, mess it up, just like we did with the sky and the clouds. And I'm going to lay it just above where the next mountain or hill is going to be. And it can be low looking, it can be bushes, it can be, you can try and make it very much a tree shape. But our eyes actually fill in quite nicely details that aren't there when it's the right colors and slightly the right shape. I think I'll do a little bit more on that one. So grabbing some more wool, breaking it, stacking it, breaking it again. So to add a little bit more depth to this, I am going to take my lightest green color, take a very small amount of the wool, again breaking it and stacking it, and I'm going to use this to add the impression of highlights on these bushes, little light spots that where the sun is hitting them. So grab a tiny bit. It's harder to mess this up and tangle it up, but just try to kind of just make it so that not the fibers aren't flat. And just add a very thin amount over some of your bush. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just is tricking your eye into going, oh, there's some light hitting there. Sometimes it's amazing what a very small amount of wool will do. A little more than I wanted there. All right, so for the last layer that's before our accents, we are going to use the lightest green and the one that I said has kind of like a yellow in it. So we're going to need a fair amount of this because we're going to cover this all the rest of this black. So let's take a larger amount. And mix that together. All of these techniques can be used with whatever picture or photograph that you see, just as long as whatever you're working on, you look at it critically and see whatever's farthest away, that's what I need to put down first, working forward. Okay. Now I will cover. I'll try and make that line a little bit smoother. And so by doing that, it tucks that bush behind the edge of that hill. Grabbing some more. So you might see that there's a bit of the dark pre-felt sticking out here. It probably won't matter because of the fact that we're going to be putting the accents of the grasses in front. But if you need to, if there's any other dark spots that you don't like, just break up some of the mix that, whatever of color it is, and just add it on top. And that way you know for sure you're not going to end up with a spot that draws the eye where people say, well, what's happening there? What's that dark spot? And again, so you're going to want to spend more time adhering the wool to the pre-felt than I'm doing here, just to make sure that it is secure. So now the fun part, grabbing these beautiful locks, picking through, finding the ones that you want. These are quite long, so sometimes you might be able to even fold them in half. Laying them where you want. You don't have to use all of them. You can cut them if you need to. It just gives a little bit of a frame to the rest of the picture to have something nice and close in the foreground. It's a very long one. By folding the ends up and kind of covering it up too, it makes more depth from the ones behind so that you don't quite know exactly what's happening. Might take some of these kind of fuzzed out ends and add it so that it shows that it's receding. Our eyes don't see quite what's happening there. And then we take our burgundy color or berry color, and you just take a small amount and you're going to break off a piece and roll it in your hands and just start dropping them onto your locked areas. Locked meaning the locks of the sheep. Generally, with small amounts of numbers of things, you want an odd amount. If you're going to add tons of berries, then it's not going to matter as much. But if you're only adding a few, artistic eye, critical eye, likes odd numbers. So once you're happy with the amount of berries and their placement, just go up and down a little bit in the middle of where your berry is. And they might kind of get lost a little bit, and you might end up having to add another color of it on top just to build up the color. And that's fine. Just grab more wool break more berries off, roll them between your fingers, and just add it to the places where your berry disappeared. But some of them being farther away and not so visible is good too. All right, we're getting there. We're almost ready. So one good thing to do is to take a picture of your project, and for some reason seeing it through a photograph is often gives you a bit of a critical eye for what needs to be changed. So even just looking through my video lens, I can see that there's some darker spots of white that I like. I might want to add actually a little bit more white right at the top there. So grabbing more of my white, messing it up, and adding a bit thicker. And this is all just subjective, whatever you want to do and add and change in your landscape. Now that I've done that, I kind of like how it looks, so I'm going to maybe actually add just a little bit more here. And that, again, shows that the clouds are poofy like this and not just flat. Remembering to break up and tangle up the wool. So you probably saw that when I lifted my project from the foam, I had to use a little bit of force to remove it, and you can see that it'll leave a little bit of wool behind. That's no big deal. The back part of our project, you'll see, has wool that's poked right through. That's great. Yours will actually have more than this because you'll have spent more time stabbing. But what we want to do to finish the edges is flip over our painting and then grab, let me just move it over a little, grab the loose ends and fold them over, and very lightly, we're not poking super deep because we don't want to make fuzziness on our landscape that we then have to deal with and keep flipping back and forth, but we're just folding it over to create a nicer edge. Got the side of my nail there. Thankfully not my finger. Always be very careful, please. And we're going to do that to all four sides. Just folding it up, tacking it to the back. One more side. This one has less poking over the edge, but you can see that by not having less coming over the edge of the pre-felt, it actually is a little bit harder to work with. It's harder to cover that edge of that pre-felt. It would have been better for me to have come a little bit farther off of the edge of my pre-felt with my wool to then be able to finish the edges of my painting a little bit easier. But that's okay, we can work with it. So once you've done all four edges, flip over your painting again. I lost a berry here. There. So what you can do now is you can mount it on a piece of wood. You can, with this one, I have a frame that I actually put it behind the glass. In the past, I've also removed the glass and just mounted it on a piece of board so that it's then exposed. I actually really like having wool paintings exposed to the air. It shows so much of the texture. It really intrigues people because it has so much more texture and dimension than just a painting would. It is my favorite way is to mount it outside the glass, but as you can see, I have it either outside or inside. It looks lovely too. I hope that you've had a lot of fun doing this painting today and that you will have success in all of your needle felting endeavors. Bye.